The pounding in Frederick Calloway's skull dragged him up from unconsciousness like a fishhook through murky water, and when his eyes cracked open, the wooden beams overhead were wrong. The air smelled of smoke and strange spices, and the woman sitting cross-legged beside him eating some kind of stew had green skin and small tusks curving over her lower lip. He jerked upright and the world spun. "Easy," she said, not looking at him. Her voice was calm, untroubled. "You drank enough festival mead last night to kill a bull. I am surprised you are awake at all." Frederick's mouth tasted like he had been chewing leather. His clothes were still on, thank God, though rumpled and smelling of wood smoke and something floral. His wrist caught his attention, bound with a braided cord of red and gold thread, flowers woven through it that were wilting now in the morning light streaming through the hide-covered window. "Where?" His voice came out as a croak. "Where am I? My home. Our home now." She spooned more stew into her mouth, chewed thoughtfully. You really do not remember. The night before existed in his memory as a series of bright fragments separated by fog. He had come to the borderlands to trade, carrying cloth and iron tools to exchange for the medicinal herbs that grew only in the hill country. His usual contacts had directed him to a festival, assured him it was safe, that the orc villages were welcoming traders now that the old war had been over for a generation. There had been music, drums that seemed to shake the earth itself, dancing, torches. Someone pressing a cup into his hand, the mead golden and sweet and impossibly smooth going down. I remember, a festival. Yes, the harvest joining. She finally turned to look at him fully, and he saw that her eyes were a deep amber, striking against her green skin. Her black hair was bound back in a thick braid. She was younger than he had first thought, maybe his own age or a bit less, with a strong jaw and high cheekbones. Not beautiful by human standards, perhaps, but there was something arresting about her face, something steady. "You participated in the rites." "The rites," he repeated stupidly. "You stood in the circle, you spoke the words, you gave me this." She lifted her own wrist, showing a matching cord, though hers looked fresh and carefully made. "You asked me very earnestly if I would have you. I said I would consider it. Then you asked again, even more earnestly, and said you had never seen anyone dance like I danced, and that you would learn to make cheese if that was what it took." The memory surfaced like a drowning man breaking the water's surface. Her spinning in the firelight, her movements powerful and sure. Him, drunk and enchanted, stumbling forward. The crowd laughing, but not unkindly. Someone showing him how to braid the cord, his clumsy fingers working the threads while she watched with an expression he could not read. "Oh God," he said. "Oh God, I didn't." "You did. Twice." She set down her bowl. "I am Greta Carn, you are Frederick Calloway, and you are now my husband by the law of my people." The binding was witnessed and sealed. The world seemed to tilt again, though he was sitting still. "That's... There must be some mistake. I was drunk. I didn't understand what I was doing. The mead does not change your words, only makes them easier to speak." Greta's tone remained matter of fact. "You participated willingly. No one forced you into the circle. Elder Mara asked you 3 times if you understood what you were doing, and each time you said yes." He remembered that too now. The old orc woman, her face seamed with age, speaking slowly and clearly. He had thought she was just being formal, ceremonial. He had been so drunk, so caught up in the moment, so far from home and lonely and overwhelmed by the strangeness and beauty of it all. "I have to go," he said, standing too quickly. The room spun again and Greta caught his arm, steadying him with a grip that was firm but not painful. "I have to get back. My family, my business, I can't just..." "Sit," she said. "You will fall on your face and I will have to explain to the village that my husband is too foolish to wait for his head to clear." There was no anger in her voice, no mockery, just statement of fact. He sat. She returned to her stew, eating in silence for a long moment. Frederick's mind raced, trying to find a way out, a solution, anything. Finally, she spoke again. "You can leave if you wish. No one will stop you. But the binding will remain until the next harvest joining, when it can be formally dissolved before the witnesses. That is 11 moons from now. 11 months. The law is the law. If you leave before then, you will be marked as an oath-breaker, and my family will be shamed for having a daughter abandoned by a husband who swore himself before the gods and the people." She met his eyes. "I will survive the shame, but it will be unpleasant." He wanted to argue, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but something in her steady gaze stopped him. She had not asked for this either. She could have refused him, probably. Could have laughed him off or walked away when he stumbled into the ceremonial circle. But she had said yes, for reasons he could not begin to fathom, and now they were both trapped by his drunken enthusiasm and her acceptance. "Why did you say yes?" he asked quietly. Greta considered this, her head tilting slightly. "You seemed kind, and very sad underneath the drinking. I thought perhaps you needed someone, and I am of an age where my mother was beginning to worry I would never take a mate." She shrugged, a rolling motion of her broad shoulders. "Also, you were funny. You tried to dance our steps and fell over twice, but you kept trying. That showed spirit." Despite everything, despite the panic and confusion and the headache still pounding behind his eyes, Frederick felt a small, inappropriate bubble of laughter trying to escape his chest. He swallowed it down. "This is insane." "Yes," Greta agreed, "but it is what we have, so now you must decide. Will you stay and honor what you have done, or will you leave and let both our families bear the weight of your choice?" She said it without accusation, but the words hit home anyway. Frederick had been raised to honor his commitments, to keep his word even when it cost him. His father had been a merchant, respected for his fair dealing and his honesty. The thought of being known as an oath-breaker, even for an oath he barely remembered making, sat wrong in his gut. But the alternative was to stay here in this strange village, married to a woman he did not know, among people who were not his own. His family back in Millerton would be appalled. His business partners would likely drop him. Humans and orcs did not marry. It was not done. It was taboo, shameful, the stuff of crude jokes and cautionary tales. He looked at Greta, who was watching him with those steady amber eyes, her expression patient. Waiting. Not pleading, not threatening, just waiting to see what kind of man he was. "I'll stay," he heard himself say. "At least until the next festival, when we can. When it can be properly dissolved, I won't leave you to face the shame alone." Something flickered in her eyes, too quick to read. "That is honorable," she said. "I will try to make the time bearable." The days that followed were strange beyond anything Frederick had ever experienced. Greta's home was a well-built longhouse on the edge of the village, solid timber with a stone hearth and sleeping quarters separated from the main living space by heavy curtains. She explained that it had been built for her when she came of age, that all adults in the village had their own homes or shared with chosen companions. Her mother lived 3 houses down. Her father had died in a hunting accident when she was young. The village itself was smaller than Frederick had expected. Perhaps 60 buildings clustered around a central square where the festival had taken place. The orcs went about their business with calm efficiency, tending their fields and livestock, working at forges and looms, living lives that seemed remarkably ordinary once you looked past the green skin and tusks. They watched Frederick, of course. Some with curiosity, others with suspicion, a few with open hostility. But Greta's presence beside him seemed to grant him a measure of protection, and no one challenged him directly. She set up a sleeping mat for him on the far side of the house, giving him privacy and space. She did not demand anything from him, did not expect him to immediately take up the role of husband in any meaningful sense. Instead, she simply continued her daily routines and allowed him to find his place within them. He learned that she was a potter, skilled with her hands, creating vessels of surprising delicacy despite her strong fingers. Her workshop was attached to the house, a lean-to structure where a kick wheel sat surrounded by shelves of drying clay pieces. She worked there most mornings, and Frederick found himself watching from the doorway, fascinated by the way she could coax form from shapeless mud. "You can come closer," she said one morning, not looking up from the bowl taking shape under her hands. "I do not bite." "Your tusks say otherwise," he replied, then froze, horrified at his own words. But Greta laughed, a short bark of genuine amusement. "These little things, they are barely worth the name. My grandmother, now she had tusks, could pierce leather with them." Her hands never stopped moving, shaping, and smoothing. "Come, sit. Tell me about your work." So he did, settling onto a stool near the wheel, and found himself talking about the trading routes he ran, the goods he carried, the constant balancing act of prices and supply and demand. She listened with real attention, asking questions that showed she understood commerce better than he would have guessed. "We trade too," she said, "though not as far-ranging as you. The southern villages want our pottery and we want their copper. There is a rhythm to it." "Do you ever go to the southern villages yourself?" "Sometimes. More often traders come to us." She glanced at him, a hint of dry humor in her eyes. "Fewer humans than we might like, many are still afraid." "Can you blame them? We were at war for generations." "No, I do not blame them." Her hand slowed, the bowl now complete, its walls even and smooth. "But I can wish it were different. We are not monsters. We are simply people who look different from you." The simple truth of it struck him. Here in her workshop, watching her work, having ordinary conversation, it was easy to forget all the stories he had grown up with. Stories of savage orcs raiding human settlements, of brutal violence and inhuman cruelty. Greta was none of those things. She was just a woman, patient and skilled and surprisingly easy to talk to. The days developed a rhythm. Greta worked her clay in the mornings while Frederick helped with the heavier tasks around the house, repairing a section of roof that had begun to leak, reinforcing a fence post. In the afternoons, she sometimes took him with her to gather clay from the riverbank, and he carried the heavy baskets while she selected the best deposits, her experienced eye spotting quality he would have missed. The village gradually grew accustomed to his presence. Children stopped staring and went back to their games. Hunters nodded to him when they passed. The baker, a gruff, older orc named Brunna, started including an extra loaf when Greta bought their daily bread, refusing payment with a grunt that might have been approval. But not everyone was welcoming. Greta's uncle, a broad-shouldered warrior named Throck, made his displeasure known whenever their paths crossed. He would mutter in the orcish tongue, words Frederick could not understand but whose tone was unmistakable. Greta always steered Frederick away from these encounters, her jaw tight. "He lost friends in the war," she explained one evening as they ate dinner, a simple stew she had taught him to help prepare. "He does not trust humans. He thinks I have shamed the family by binding myself to you." "He might be right," Frederick said quietly. Greta set down her spoon, leveling that steady gaze at him. "He is not right. There is no shame in choosing one's own path, even if the path is strange. You are here. You honored your word when you could have fled. That is worth something." In the evenings they talked. She asked him about his life, his family, the human towns and cities he had traveled through. He found himself describing his childhood in Millerton, his father's trading business, the way his mother had taught him to read using the ledgers as primers. His younger sister, married now to a carpenter and expecting her first child. The life he had left behind, the life that seemed increasingly distant with each passing day. In turn, she told him about growing up in the village, about learning to work clay from her mother, about the year the river flooded and everyone had to work together to save the harvest. About her father, who had been gentle despite his size, who had sung to her when she was small. About the weight of being unmarried past the age most of her peers had found mates, the subtle pressure from her mother, the worry that she might end up alone. "I am not easy to love," she said one night, her voice matter of fact. "I do not soften myself to please others. I say what I think." Many men found that difficult. "I don't find it difficult," Frederick said, and realized as he spoke that it was true. Her directness was refreshing after a lifetime of human courtship games, of hints and implications and carefully worded suggestions. Greta said what she meant and meant what she said. There was a freedom in that. She looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. "You are not what I expected, Frederick Calloway." "What did you expect?" "I thought you would leave. Most humans would have." She turned her gaze to the fire. "I thought I would spend these 11 moons alone, waiting for the shame to arrive. I'm still here." "Yes, you are." The weeks passed, and Frederick found himself settling into the rhythms of village life with surprising ease. He learned to identify the herbs Greta used in her cooking, helped her harvest vegetables from the small garden behind the house, even started picking up words of the Orcish language from listening to the conversations around him. The tongue was guttural and complex, but musical in its own way, and Greta seemed pleased when he managed his first stumbling sentences. He wrote letters home, careful missives that mentioned he was delayed on business, that the trading opportunities were more complex than anticipated, that he would return when he could. He did not mention the marriage. He could not imagine how to explain it, what words would possibly make sense of what had happened. One morning he woke to find Greta already up, standing in the doorway and looking out at heavy rain falling from a slate-gray sky. She had her arms wrapped around herself, an unusual gesture from someone usually so contained. "You are thinking about something," he said, rising and joining her. "The roads will be mud," she said. "If you wanted to leave before winter sets in, you would need to go soon. After the first snows, you will be trapped here until spring." The implication hung in the air between them. This was his chance, his last real opportunity to leave before the weather made travel impossible. He could go now, return to his life, deal with the shame from a distance. Let the 11 moons pass in separation, then return in the autumn to formally dissolve the binding. He thought about Millerton, about his small rented room above the merchant's hall, about his careful routines and his business ledgers and his respectable, predictable life. He thought about his family, about the disappointment they would feel if they knew what he had done. About the human woman his mother had been trying to nudge him toward, the brewer's daughter with her careful smiles and proper manners. Then he thought about the past weeks here. About watching Greta work her clay, the intense concentration on her face as she shaped beauty from earth. About their evening conversations, her dry humor and unexpected insights. About the way she had never once pressured him or made demands, had simply accepted his presence and made space for him in her life. About how he had started to feel less like a stranger fulfilling an obligation and more like someone finding an unexpected home. "I'll stay," he said. Greta turned to look at him, and for the first time since that first morning he saw genuine surprise in her eyes. "The winter is hard here, cold, long. You would be more comfortable in your human town." "Maybe, but I said I would stay until the next harvest joining. I meant it." Even though you could leave now and no one could blame you. The weather is excuse enough. He met her amber gaze steadily. I don't want to leave. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them spoke aloud. Greta's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for him to track, before settling back into her usual composed calm. But something had changed in her eyes, a warmth that had not been there before. Then we will prepare for winter together, she said quietly. There is much to do. She was not exaggerating. The village threw itself into preparation with focused intensity, everyone working to ensure they would survive the cold months ahead. Frederick found himself hauling firewood, helping to smoke meat, learning to weave the tight grass mats that would provide extra insulation against the walls. The work was hard and physical, leaving him exhausted each night, but there was satisfaction in it too. Purpose. Greta's mother, a stern woman named Cora, began to soften toward him as she saw him working alongside the others. She started greeting him by name, even offered him tips on the best way to stack wood for drying. It was not warmth exactly, but it was acceptance of a sort. The uncle, Throck, remained hostile. Frederick learned to avoid him when possible, to keep his head down and not engage when the older orc muttered insults. But one afternoon, carrying a load of firewood to Greta's house, he turned a corner and found his path blocked by Throck and two other orcish men. Human, Throck said, his accent thick but his meaning clear. You think you belong here, think you are one of us now. Frederick set down the wood carefully, mind racing. He was alone, outnumbered, and well aware that any fight would end badly for him. I think I am honoring the commitment I made, nothing more. You dishonor her. You dishonor all of us. You should leave while you still can. Is that a threat? Throck stepped forward, looming. He was a head taller than Frederick and twice as broad, scarred and weathered from years of fighting. It is advice, for your own good. I appreciate your concern, Frederick said, keeping his voice level despite his racing heart, but I will stay. For a long moment, Throck stared at him and Frederick was certain violence was coming. But then Greta's voice cut through the tension. Uncle. She stood at the end of the path, arms crossed, her expression thunderous. She spoke in rapid Orcish, her tone sharp and brooking no argument. Throck responded in kind, his voice rising, but Greta did not back down. The argument escalated, drawing the attention of other villagers, until finally an older orc Frederick recognized as one of the village elders intervened. More Orcish followed, voices overlapping, and Frederick could only stand and watch as his fate was apparently debated without his understanding. Finally, Elder Mara, the same woman who had officiated the ceremony, raised her hand for silence. She spoke directly to Frederick, slowly and carefully. Throck challenges your place here. Says you are not truly bound to Greta, that you only pretend to honor the rites while you wait to flee. He calls for the binding to be dissolved now, so you can leave and stop bringing shame to the village. Frederick looked at Greta, who was staring at her uncle with an expression of profound hurt and anger. Then he looked back at the elder. I am not pretending, he said clearly. I made a choice, perhaps foolishly, perhaps while too drunk to think straight. But I made it, and I have been trying every day since to honor it. I have not fled. I have worked alongside your people. I have learned your language and your ways, and I will stay, as I promised, until the next harvest joining. He took a breath. If Greta wants me to leave, I will go. But that choice is hers, not her uncle's. Elder Mara translated this, and a murmur ran through the growing crowd. Throck spat words that needed no translation. The elder turned to Greta. Daughter, what do you wish? Greta looked at Frederick for a long moment, her amber eyes searching his face. Then she spoke, her words quiet but firm. The elder nodded. She says you will stay. that you have shown honor and that her uncle's concern, while noted, is not needed. The binding stands." Throck made a disgusted sound and stalked away, his companions following. The crowd began to disperse, villagers returning to their work, though Frederick caught many thoughtful glances in his direction. Elder Mara approached him directly. "You have courage, human, and you have made my young friend smile more in these weeks than I have seen in years. Do not make me regret allowing this binding." "I will do my best, Elder." She nodded and walked away, leaving Frederick and Greta standing alone in the path. Greta picked up the dropped firewood, stacking it back into carrying order with brisk efficiency. "Thank you," Frederick said quietly, "for standing up for me. He had no right to challenge you." Her voice was tight with anger. "He fights old wars that are already over. I am tired of it. He wants to protect you, I understand that." "I do not need protection from you." She met his eyes. "Do I?" "No, never." She held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded. "Good. Now come. This wood will not stack itself, and the sun is already setting." That night, sitting by the fire after dinner, Greta was quieter than usual. Frederick gave her space, working on repairing a leather strap that had torn, concentrating on the careful stitching his father had taught him years ago. Finally, she spoke. "Why did you really stay, when you could have left before the snows?" He set down the leather, considering his answer carefully. "At first, because it seemed like the right thing to do, the honorable choice." He paused. "But that is not why I am staying now." "Then why?" He looked at her, at the firelight playing across her green skin, at the serious set of her jaw, and the way she held herself so carefully composed, even when he knew she was feeling deeply. "Because I am happy here. Happier than I have been in a long time. And because when I think about leaving, about going back to my old life, it feels like losing something important, something I did not even know I was looking for." Greta's hand stilled on the mug she had been holding. "You speak of me." "Yes. You barely know me, Frederick. We have been together only a matter of weeks, and not by either of our choosing. I know, but I would like to know you better, if you will let me." He leaned forward slightly. "I know this is strange. I know I am not what you wanted or expected. But I am grateful to that drunken version of myself who stumbled into the ceremonial circle, because he brought me here, to you." She stared at him, and he could see her processing his words, weighing them against whatever she was feeling. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I did not want to care for you. It seemed foolish to grow attached to someone who would leave when the time came, but you make it difficult to keep that distance." "I am sorry," he said, though he was not sorry at all. "Do not be." She set down her mug and shifted closer to him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. "I am tired of being careful, tired of protecting myself from disappointment." She reached out and took his hand, her grip warm and strong. "You say you want to know me better. I think I would like to know you better too, all of you, not just the polite guest who helps carry firewood." Frederick felt something tight in his chest loosen, something he had not even realized he was holding clenched. "I would like that very much." They sat together in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to coals. It was not a kiss, not a grand declaration, but it felt like a beginning. A real one, not born of festival mead and misunderstanding, but of genuine connection slowly built through shared days and honest words. The first snow came a week later, heavy flakes that turned the world white and quiet. Frederick woke to find Greta already up, standing at the window and watching the falling snow with a small smile. "Beautiful," she said when she noticed him watching. "Yes," he agreed, though he was looking at her. She glanced over, caught his expression, and her smile widened. "You are going to be cold, coming from your warm human lands. Our winters are harsh. Then I will need someone to keep me warm. It was bold, bolder than he had been before, but her smile did not fade. Perhaps that can be arranged. The days shortened and the cold deepened, and the village turned inward, gathering around hearths and shared meals. Frederick and Greta fell into new rhythms, sitting closer by the fire, their evening conversations growing longer and more intimate. She told him about her fears, her dreams, the ways she had felt different from the other women in the village who seemed to find partnerships so easily. He told her about the loneliness of his trading life, always moving, never settling, the way he had started to wonder if he would spend his whole life alone. "We are a pair of unlikely fools," she said one night, her head resting against his shoulder. "Bound by accident and finding it was no accident at all. The best things in life are often unplanned," he replied. She lifted her head to look at him. "Do you mean that?" Every word. This time, when she kissed him, it was not drunken confusion or ceremonial obligation. It was deliberate and certain, her lips warm against his, her hand coming up to cup his face with unexpected gentleness. He returned the kiss with all the feeling that had been building in him over the weeks, and when they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she smiled. "Well," she said. "That was overdue." He laughed, giddy and relieved and more in love than he had ever been in his life. "Somewhat." They moved slowly, cautiously, learning each other with care and attention. Greta was patient with his uncertainty, and he tried to match her directness with honesty about his own wants and boundaries. The physical side of their relationship grew alongside the emotional, each feeding the other, until the two sleeping mats were joined into one, and the house truly became their shared home. Winter deepened, and the village settled into its quiet season. Frederick learned to ice fish through holes chopped in the frozen river, standing for hours in the brutal cold alongside orcish men who had begun to accept him as one of their own. He learned to tell stories in the orcish style, dramatic and full of gestures, making the children laugh during the long, dark evenings. He learned that Greta's favorite time of day was dawn, and started waking early to sit with her and watch the sun rise over the snowy landscape. They argued sometimes, usually over small things, learning the edges of each other's tempers and the best ways to reconcile. Greta was stubborn when she felt she was right, and Frederick had a tendency to withdraw when hurt rather than address problems directly. But they worked through it, committed to understanding each other, to building something real. His letters home became less frequent, and when he did write, he found himself describing the village, the people, the life he was building, still without mentioning Greta directly. He knew he would have to tell his family eventually, but the words would not come. How could he explain what he barely understood himself? How could he make them see what he felt? Midwinter came, and with it a festival of lights where every house set candles in the windows and the village square blazed with bonfires. Frederick and Greta attended together, her hand in his, and he felt the eyes of the community on them, measuring, judging, but more accepting now than they had been. Even Throck nodded curtly when their paths crossed, which Greta said was the closest to approval they would likely get. "He has a hard head," she said, "but he is seeing that you are not what he feared." "What did he fear?" "That you would hurt me, take from me and leave me broken." She squeezed his hand. "You have done the opposite." In the deep dark of winter, with weeks still before the thaw, Frederick received a letter from home. It had come with a trader who braved the snow routes, and he recognized his sister's handwriting on the outside. He opened it with trepidation. The letter was long and rambling, full of news from Millerton. His sister's baby had been born, a healthy boy. His mother was well but worried about him. Business contacts were asking when he would return. And then, near the end, a paragraph that made his blood run cold. Mother has been making arrangements with the brewer's family. She believes you and Catherine would make a good match. Catherine is agreeable, and her father is offering favorable terms for a partnership. When you return in the spring, there is to be a formal introduction and, if all goes well, a betrothal by summer's end. Frederick read the paragraph 3 times, each time with growing dread. His mother meant well, he knew. She wanted to see him settled and happy. But she had no idea what had happened, no idea that he was already married, already committed to someone else. And Catherine, the brewer's daughter, was a perfectly nice woman who deserved better than to be caught up in this mess. Greta found him sitting by the fire, the letter crumpled in his fist, staring at nothing. "What is wrong?" He handed her the letter silently. She read it slowly, her orcish education having included human common tongue but requiring concentration. When she reached the relevant paragraph, her expression went carefully blank. "I see. Greta, I didn't know. I never agreed to anything. My mother is just planning your future," Greta finished, "as mothers do." She set down the letter. "She does not know about me. No. I have not told them. I did not know how, and now you must." He reached for her hand, desperate to make her understand. "I am not interested in Catherine. I am not interested in any match my mother might make. I am here with you because I want to be. But your family expects you home. Expects you to return to your life." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the hurt underneath. "Perhaps they are right. Perhaps it is time you remembered what you left behind." "What I left behind does not matter anymore. This is my life now. You are my life." She pulled her hand back, standing and moving to the window, her back to him. "We agreed to stay together until the harvest joining, until the binding could be properly dissolved. That was the arrangement. Things have changed." "Have they?" She turned, and her eyes were wet. "Or have you simply been hiding here, hiding from the choices you must make? The festival is still months away, Frederick. You have time to return home, to see your family, to meet this Catherine, and decide what you truly want." "I know what I want." "Do you?" Her voice cracked slightly. "You have been here in this small village, in this strange life, separate from everything you knew. But the real world is still out there. Your family, your business, your people. Can you truly say you want to give all that up? That you want to spend your life here, as an outsider among orcs, bound to a woman your family will never accept?" The words hit him like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were the fears he had been pushing down, refusing to examine. She was right that he had been hiding, had been living in a bubble where the consequences of his choice seemed distant and abstract, but his family's expectations were real. The human world's prejudices were real. The life he would be giving up was real. "I need to think," he said quietly. Greta nodded, her expression closing off. "Take your time. I will be in the workshop." She left, and Frederick sat alone by the dying fire, his sister's letter heavy in his hands. The smart thing, the sensible thing, would be to leave. To return home, make his excuses to Greta, and dissolve the binding at the festival in absentia. To marry Catherine or someone like her, to live a normal life, to make his mother happy and preserve his reputation and his business. But the thought of it felt like death. He had been alive these past months in a way he had never been before. Had felt seen and known and valued for exactly who he was, not who he was supposed to be. Greta had never asked him to be anything other than himself. Had never demanded he soften his edges or play social games or maintain appearances. With her, he could simply be Frederick, and that was enough. The night stretched on, and still he sat, turning the problem over and over in his mind. By the time dawn broke, cold and clear, he had made his decision. He found Greta in her workshop, though she was not working. She sat on her stool staring at the silent wheel, her hands folded in her lap. I am going home, he said. She flinched but did not turn. I understand. I am going home, he continued, to tell my family the truth. To tell them that I am married, that I am staying here and that they can accept it or not as they choose. And then I am coming back to you. Now she turned, her eyes wide. Frederick, I should have told them from the beginning. I was a coward hiding from it, hoping somehow it would resolve itself. But you are right that I cannot keep living in this bubble. I need to face my family, face the consequences of what I have done, and make my choice clear. He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. And my choice is you. It has been you for weeks now. I was just too afraid to fully admit it. They will disown you. Your business, your reputation, everything you worked for. Maybe, probably. He brought her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. But I would rather have you and nothing else than have everything else without you. A tear tracked down her green cheek. You are a fool, Frederick Calloway. I proposed to you twice while drunk off my mind on festival mead. I think we established my foolishness some time ago. She laughed, the sound breaking into a sob, and then she was in his arms, holding him tight. If you leave and change your mind, I will understand. I will not hold it against you. I will not change my mind. This is not fear or doubt talking. This is certainty. He pulled back to look at her. I love you, Greta. I should have said it sooner. I love you and I want to spend my life with you, here in this village, making pots and raising children and growing old together. If you will have me. If I will have you, she repeated, her smile breaking through the tears. You foolish, wonderful, impossible man. Of course I will have you. I have had you since that first ridiculous night when you fell over trying to dance, and then proposed twice, because once was not emphatic enough. He kissed her then, long and deep, and when they broke apart, the workshop was filled with the golden light of morning. The journey home took 2 weeks, traveling through snow and cold with a small merchant caravan heading south. Frederick spent the long hours rehearsing what he would say, how he would explain, but no words seemed adequate. In the end, he decided he would simply tell the truth, plainly and directly, and let the consequences fall where they would. Millerton looked smaller than he remembered, its familiar streets now feeling oddly constricting after months in the open spaces of the borderlands. He went first to his sister's house, wanting to meet the new nephew and shore up his courage before facing his mother. His sister Ellen opened the door, her face lighting up with joy before clouding with concern. Fred, Mother said you were not returning until spring. Is everything well? May I come in? I need to talk to you. She ushered him inside, calling for her husband to bring tea, settling Frederick by the fire with the baby in his arms. The child was tiny and perfect, and Frederick felt a pang of longing for a future he could almost see. You look different, Ellen said, studying him. Thinner, harder somehow. But happier. I am happy, he said. That is what I need to talk to you about. He told her everything. The festival, the drunken proposal, the marriage, the weeks of getting to know Greta, falling in love, the decision to stay. Ellen listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, concern, and something that might have been understanding. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Mother is going to lose her mind. I know. Father would have too if he were still alive. I know that too. Ellen looked down at her hands. The whole town will talk. You know how they are about orcs, about mixing with non-humans. It will be a scandal. Yes. And you are willing to face that, to lose everything you have built here, all for a woman you have known only a few months. Frederick thought about Greta's steady amber eyes, her quiet strength, the way she made him feel like he was finally exactly where he was supposed to be. Yes, without hesitation, his sister sighed. Then you are braver than I thought, or more foolish, perhaps both. She reached over and squeezed his hand. "But if she makes you happy, truly happy, then I am glad for you, even if I do not entirely understand it. Will you stand with me when I tell Mother? Someone has to keep her from burning down the house in fury." Ellen smiled slightly. "She really has her heart set on the match with Catherine, you know. She has been planning the wedding for months. Catherine will find someone else, someone who can love her properly, not someone whose heart is already spoken for." The conversation with his mother went as badly as he feared. She raged, she wept. She accused him of throwing away his life for a passing fancy with a savage. She said things in her anger that he knew she would later regret, and he bore them as best he could, keeping his voice calm and his resolve steady. "I am sorry to disappoint you," he said when she had finally run out of words. "I am sorry that this is not the life you wanted for me, but it is the life I have chosen, and I am asking you to respect that choice." "I will not accept this," she said coldly. "If you go back to her, if you insist on this shameful union, you are no longer welcome in this house." The words hurt, but he had expected them. "I am sorry you feel that way. I hope in time you will change your mind. But if you do not, I will still love you, and I will still be grateful for everything you gave me." He left his mother's house with a heavy heart but a clear conscience. Ellen walked him to the edge of town, the baby bundled against the cold. "Write to me," she said. "Tell me how things are. And if you ever have children, I want to meet them, whatever Mother says. I promise. Be happy, Fred. That is all any of us really want." He hugged her, careful of the baby between them, and then set out on the long road back to the borderlands, back to Greta, back to the life he had chosen. The return journey felt longer than the trip out, his impatience to be back making every mile stretch. But finally, in the weak afternoon sun of early spring, he crested the last hill and saw the orc village spread below him, smoke rising from chimneys, the river running full with snowmelt. He found Greta in her workshop as he had known he would. She looked up at the sound of his footsteps, her hands stilling on the clay, her expression carefully neutral. "You came back. Did you doubt I would?" "Every day," she admitted. "Every single day." He crossed to her, pulling her up from the stool and into his arms. "I told them. My mother disowned me. My business contacts will likely drop me, but I do not care. I am here and I am staying, and if you will have me, I would like to marry you. Properly, soberly, with full knowledge of what I am doing." Greta pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "The harvest joining is still months away. Then I will ask you every day until it arrives. Greta Karn, will you marry me? For real this time, not because I am drunk and you are kind enough to accept my ridiculous proposals, but because I love you and I cannot imagine my life without you." "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, you impossible fool. I will marry you every day of the week if that is what it takes." He kissed her, and the workshop filled with the sound of her laughter, and Frederick knew he was finally, truly home. The months until the harvest joining passed in a blur of happiness and preparation. Frederick dissolved what remained of his trading business, selling his contacts and routes to a colleague, and using the funds to buy goods he thought might sell well in the borderlands. He would start over, build a new trade network connecting the orc villages to human settlements willing to look past prejudice for good merchandise. Greta's pottery sold well, as did herbs and medicinal plants that grew wild in the hill country. Frederick proved to have a knack for negotiation, and slowly, carefully, he began to build bridges between the communities. It was slow work, and there were many who refused to deal with him once they learned of his marriage, but there were others who cared more about profit than propriety. Elder Mara watched his efforts with approval. "You are good for our people," she told him one afternoon. "You bring us opportunities we would not have had otherwise. I am just trying to make a living, Frederick demurred. "You are building a future," she corrected. "Not just for yourself and Greta, but for all of us. Do not underestimate the value of that." As the summer deepened and the harvest approached, the village began preparations for the festival. This time, Frederick would participate with full understanding, with clear eyes and sober mind. He spent weeks preparing his proposal, wanting to get it exactly right. The night before the festival, he lay awake beside Greta, watching the moonlight play across her sleeping face. She had given him so much, had accepted him when she had every reason not to, had loved him even when it would have been easier not to. He wanted to give her something equally precious in return. The harvest-joining festival dawned clear and warm, the sky brilliant blue above the village square. People gathered from neighboring settlements, both orc and a few brave humans, filling the open space with color and noise and celebration. Frederick dressed carefully in new clothes Greta had made for him, embroidered with orcish symbols of fertility and fortune. When the sun reached its zenith, Elder Mara called for silence and the ceremonial portion of the festival began. Couples who wished to bind themselves came forward one by one, speaking their vows before the community. Some were young, barely adults, their faces shining with hope. Others were older, second or third partnerships after loss or dissolution. Finally, Elder Mara called for any who wished to renew or formalize existing bonds. Frederick took Greta's hand and led her into the ceremonial circle. The village watched in absolute silence. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the question that had hung over the community for nearly a year. Would the human truly commit, or would he take the opportunity to leave as was his right? Frederick faced Greta, taking both her hands in his. He had memorized the words in Orcish, had practiced until he could speak them clearly despite his human tongue's struggle with the guttural sounds. "Greta Karn, daughter of Cora, chosen of my heart. I stand before you as I did nearly a year ago, but this time I know what I do. I know what I ask. I know the weight of these words and the commitment they carry." He took a breath, holding her amber gaze with his own. "I proposed to you twice in drunken foolishness, and you accepted me with grace I did not deserve. Today I propose a third time in full knowledge and sobriety. Be my wife, my partner, my home. Let me stand beside you, support you, love you all the days of my life. Let me learn from you and grow with you and build with you a future we can be proud of." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of wedding bands he had commissioned from the village smith, worked silver etched with patterns that blended Orcish and human traditions. "Marry me again, Greta. Marry me for real." The silence stretched so long that Frederick's heart began to pound with fear. Had he been wrong? Had she changed her mind? Then Greta smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Yes, Frederick Calloway, I will marry you a third time, and every time after that you ask. You are my choice, freely made, fully meant. I will stand beside you, support you, and love you all your days and all of mine." Elder Mara stepped forward, her weathered face creased in a genuine smile. "Then by the law of our people and the witness of this community, I renew and formalize your binding. What was made in joy and confusion is now made in certainty and love. You are husband and wife, bound before the gods and the people." The village erupted in cheers. Even Throck, standing at the back of the crowd, nodded once in what might have been respect. The celebration that followed was glorious. Frederick and Greta danced together, his steps more sure now after months of practice, her movements strong and graceful as ever. They ate until they were full, drank mead in moderation while laughing about the last time, accepted congratulations from what felt like every person in the borderlands. As the sun set and the bonfire rose high, casting light and warmth across the square, Frederick found himself standing at the edge of the celebration with Greta tucked against his side. "Are you happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied. "You have given me more than I knew I wanted. You gave me a life," he countered. "A real life, not just the hollow existence I had before. You gave me purpose and home and love." She turned in his arms, reaching up to cup his face. "We gave each other everything. That is what partnership means." They stood together, watching the celebration, knowing that challenges still lay ahead. The prejudice against mixed unions would not disappear overnight. His family might never accept their marriage. Building their trade network would be difficult, painstaking work. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. The months turned to years, and Frederick and Greta built their life with patience and determination. Their trading business grew slowly but steadily, creating connections that gradually broke down some of the barriers between human and orc communities. It was not easy, and there were setbacks and disappointments, but they persisted. Ellen came to visit when her son was old enough to travel, staying for a week and carefully not mentioning their mother's continued refusal to acknowledge the marriage. But she and Greta took to each other immediately, bonding over shared experiences of stubborn brothers and husbands. When she left, it was with promises to return and an open invitation for Frederick and Greta to visit Millerton, even if they could not stay at the family home. Greta's pottery became sought after, her pieces traveling as far as the coast, carried by traders who valued her work regardless of her green skin. She trained apprentices, passing on her knowledge to a new generation, and took quiet pride in the beauty she brought into the world. 2 years after the third proposal, Greta told Frederick she was pregnant. He wept with joy, holding her carefully as if she were made of glass, until she laughed and told him she was not so fragile that he could not embrace her properly. Their son was born in the spring, healthy and squalling and perfect. They named him Ethan Calloway Carn, blending their names as they had blended their lives. He had his mother's amber eyes and his father's brown hair, his skin a warm tan that spoke of both his heritages. Frederick wrote to Ellen, and she came to meet her nephew, bringing gifts and love and news that their mother had softened somewhat upon hearing she had a grandchild. Not enough to visit, not yet, but enough to stop saying Frederick was dead to her. It was progress, small and fragile but real. As Ethan grew, Frederick and Greta watched him navigate a world that did not quite know what to make of him. Half human, half orc, belonging fully to neither community, but accepted by both in the borderlands where such lines had begun to blur. He would have his challenges, they knew, but he would also have advantages neither of his parents had had. He would grow up knowing both worlds, comfortable in both, able to bridge divides that still seemed insurmountable to many. On their 5th anniversary, Frederick and Greta stood together in the same spot where he had proposed the 3rd time, watching Ethan play in the village square with other children, his laughter ringing bright and clear. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stumbled into that ceremonial circle?" Greta asked. "Never," Frederick said firmly, "because even if I had not been drunk, I think I would have ended up here eventually. Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe the path would have been different, but I think we were meant to find each other." "That is very romantic for such a practical man." "You bring out the romantic in me," she laughed, that wonderful sound he never tired of hearing. "I love you, Frederick Calloway. Thank you for proposing twice and then a 3rd time for good measure." "I love you, Greta Carn Calloway. Thank you for saying yes, all 3 times." Ethan came running over, demanding to be picked up, and Frederick swung him onto his shoulders while Greta took his hand. Together they walked home through the village that had become their world, past neighbors who had become family. toward a future built on love that had started in chaos and grown into certainty. The sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, and Frederick thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought him here. A trading trip that had turned into a festival, ceremonial mead that had loosened his tongue, a beautiful orc woman who had danced like nothing he had ever seen, 2 drunken proposals and 1 sober woman willing to take a chance on a foolish human. Years later, when Ethan was old enough to ask how his parents had met, Frederick would tell him the story of the man who woke up, married in an orc village, and how the orc woman beside him said he had proposed twice. He would tell him about fear and honor, about choosing love over comfort, about building a life from the ruins of a drunken mistake. He would tell him that sometimes the best things in life come from the choices we barely remember making, and that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. But that was years away. Tonight, they were just a family, walking home together in the fading light, their hands linked and their hearts full. Living the happily ever after that had started with a stumble and a slurred proposal, and a green-skinned woman willing to say yes to a stranger. The village settled into evening quiet around them, smoke rising from chimneys, the smell of cooking fires and growing things, the sound of distant laughter and nearby love. Frederick looked at his wife, at his son, at the home they had made together, and felt nothing but gratitude for the drunk fool he had been one harvest night, stumbling into a ceremonial circle and proposing twice, because once did not seem emphatic enough. It had been the best mistake of his life, and every day since had been a gift. Every morning he woke beside Greta was a morning he chose her again, sober and certain and full of love. The binding that had started in confusion had become unbreakable by choice, forged in the fires of prejudice, overcome and families built, and a love that grew stronger with each passing season. As they reached their house, Ethan already half asleep on Frederick's shoulders, Greta paused at the threshold and turned to look at her husband. The setting sun caught her face, highlighting the strong lines of her jaw, the curve of her tusks, the amber eyes that had captivated him even through the haze of festival mead. She was older now, as was he, marked by the passage of time and the work of building a life together. But she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "That I would propose to you 1,000 times if you asked. Once drunk, twice drunk, and once sober is quite enough," she replied with a smile, "but I appreciate the sentiment." They went inside together, into the warmth and light of home, into the life they had made against all odds and expectations. And if sometimes Frederick still marveled at the strange path that had led him here, he never once wished he had taken a different one. This was where he belonged, with this woman in this place, building this future. It was exactly enough. It was everything. And it had all started with a festival, some potent mead, and the willingness of one stubborn orc woman to say yes to a fool who proposed twice and then, when it really mattered, found the courage to propose a 3rd time with full knowledge of what he was asking. They lived and loved and built their days together, and their story became one told around fires and shared over meals, a story of unexpected love and choices honored, and the strange, beautiful ways that life sometimes delivers exactly what we need in the form we least expect. The man who woke up, married in an orc village, and the woman who said he had proposed twice became legends in the borderlands, proof that love could bridge any divide if given the chance to grow. And they lived happily, fully, completely, from that moment forward into all their days.